Hello and welcome to the Business of Story. I'm Park Howell, and I'm known as the world's most industrious storyteller because I consult, teach, coach, and speak on how to put your story to work for you to ignite your sales, build your brand, and grow your people. Today's show is all about tapping into your own personal story for professional gain because, as Oscar Wilde said, be yourself. Everyone else is already taken. But you gotta know how to tell your story. The first place to start to become a confident and compelling communicator is with my new course, The ABTs of Selling. In under 18 minutes, through 3 short videos, you'll craft your and, but, therefore foundational narrative framework. It's essentially the DNA of story that will have you telling your story in no time, and one that will actually hook into the primal part of your audience's brain where all of their real decisions about you are being made. Nick Anderson of Harlan Medical said about the ABTs of Selling, the online training course was a cinch to go through, punchy and informative. I don't know if I've ever been called punchy and informative before, but I like it. Patrick Connors of Property Tax Consulting said, I bumped into the ABTs of Selling program on your Facebook page. I purchased it and took the program. How fantastic it is. I'm going to use the ABT every day now. Thank you. And finally, Toronto-based consultant Michael Ealing said, the ABTs of Selling Quick Start course and your clear content plus magnetic teaching helped me make important changes to my ABT. But it has also left me hungry. I don't know how to apply my updated ABT to my conversations with clients and with potential clients. Therefore, I am going to have it in front of me as I make my how's it going, how can I help calls. I think it will help me listen for complexity and offer simplicity. I just love it when someone praises the course with, well, an ABT. You can enroll now at businessofstory.thinkific.com at the introductory price of just $35. So then the next time you tell your story, you will hook your audience from the very start, but only if you use an ABT. Therefore, businessofstory.thinkific.com. So how do you tell your own unique story? Today's guest, former punk band member and co-owner of Retro Real Estate, John O'Hagan, preaches what you don't do is being shy about being you.
There are certainly times and places where if you're working for someone else, they have a standard of care or standard of practice that you have to abide to, buy milk and keep the lights on and, keep the landlord off your back. That's a necessary evil, sure. But if you're in any sort of self-lead generation business, if you're doing anything but being authentically yourself, I think you're probably doing yourself a disservice.
John has been a realtor for 14 years, a designated broker for the last 2, and started Retro Real Estate 3.5 years ago to go out on his own. He's a former co-founder and owner of Golden Rule Tattoo, which started in 2010 and became the busiest tattoo shop in metropolitan Phoenix with more #1 awards than any other tattoo competitor out there. But you might call John an eclectic entrepreneur because he loves to follow his interests, including founding a punk rock band back in the day, and then getting into real estate when in 2005 he co-founded the Maxwell O'Hagan Group. His enterprise is a real estate investment and design company that buys and does wild remodels on homes, to either resell them or keep them for vacation rentals. John is also an instructor at Gracie, Arizona, where he's taught Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu for 4+ years, has been training and competing all over the world for the past 11 years. He doesn't come off as your typical real estate dude, as you might imagine, and in fact has been cross-examined by neighbors when showing homes. Why? Because, as you'll learn, John is just being himself, even when he feels odd about it, which has led to a bonanza of business. So here's how you muster the courage of just being you. Warts, t-shirts, tattoos, and all. and how you can build a business with your own unique story. Please welcome to the Business of Story, John O'Hagan. John, welcome to the show.
Oh, Park, it's a pleasure to be here. Thank you.
You know, we are out here in the luxurious confines of the Summit Building patio area because I have taken the Business of Story on the road. So
We're
is just
doing it.
Yet another place. We've got traffic going on behind you. We just had a lovely rainstorm here in Phoenix, Arizona. It was 115 about 3 days ago, and I think it's 85 out right now.
It was perfect today. We took the dogs to the vet, and we were able to actually get them out on the sidewalk a little bit, and they were enjoying the rain. So the car smells bad, but we're enjoying the day anyways.
Well, and we're going to talk real estate and branding and personal branding, the power of that, and how you can stand out in a very, very crowded industry. And so what better than having road noise and motorcycles going on behind you? We're talking real estate.
I love it. Yeah, let's keep it raw.
John, you and I got to meet each other a couple weeks ago from our good friend Chip Scutari here at Scutari and Cieslak.
Chip the man.
Chip the man,
yes.
A prominent public relations firm here in Phoenix, Arizona. They've bunked in with me here at Park & Co. for the last 11 years. And
Has it been that long?
It's been that long.
Okay,
yeah.
That's awesome.
And they're great guys.
Yeah.
You know, Dave Cieslak, Chip Scutari, Bill Berlino, the whole gang.
The whole crew.
So I'm really glad he called me the other day, and you and I, met a couple weeks ago and said, hey, man, would you be interested in having John because of your backstory and what you've done that's really amazing in the real estate world by just being yourself.
Yeah. Surprised to be able to have the turnaround that I did when I just stopped trying to be a weird version of someone else.
You just wanted to be the weird version of yourself.
Just that I'm weird enough, like it was a really scary time. There was a lot of naysayers in my world. I've got mostly supportive people, but there were a lot of people that were worried. But yeah, at a certain point, you just got to decide that it's time to be you.
Give us a quick glimpse of your real estate firm.
Sure.
Retro Real Estate.
Yeah.
And you can check them out as you're listening to this at retrorealestate.com. And then I want to come back to that brand story later, but just give us a synopsis of what it is, and then let's talk about how you got there.
Sure. So Retro Real Estate is a real estate firm. We specialize in helping buyers and sellers acquire or sell property here in Phoenix, Arizona. We're valley-wide. We mostly focus on historic mid-century homes, mid-century modern, things like that. Basically anything built before 75 to 78 that's got some interest to it. We do take other listings and, help buyers find any kind of home, but there's a specialty and a lot of specialized knowledge that's necessary in our niche to make sure you're getting the best representation both for selling and buying. And we just love these old houses.
And why mid-century? What was it about that attracted you?
That's a great question. So I fell in love with homes when I was on tour in a punk band, believe it or not.
A punk band?
A punk band,
What was it called?
We were called Where Eagles Dare.
Where Eagles Dare.
Yeah, I've played in a few touring bands, so that was probably the biggest or most well-known one. And early 2000s, living in a smelly van with a bunch of friends, and there's a lot of time in between. This is before smartphones too, so there's a lot of time to look at stuff. But I think growing up here in Phoenix, I didn't quite recognize the exciting architecture. It just sort of was. I grew up in 1950s homes. I grew up in around 1920s homes in the historic districts, and it just sort of was what it was. And finding the affinity by travel, like coming home and being like, God, I love the desert, I didn't realize I loved the desert. I didn't realize I loved these ranch homes, these red brick ranch homes. They feel like home. And I think most people want to look at their homes like an investment, but it's actually a very emotional and nostalgic thing to purchase something and live in it and raise a family in it. And there are unique features of these homes that to me are just unreplicable and timeless, and I love it. I really, really love it.
I know what you mean. I was literally just up in Seattle yesterday. I was spending some time with my 96-year-old mom,
nice,
who is still living in the same 2-story ranch home that she and my dad built for us 7 kids. We moved into in 1968. She's still on 12 acres up there. She's doing great.
That's awesome.
And it is nostalgic. You go back, it's extraordinarily dated now, and it's kind of long in the tooth, as they say. But hanging out, checking out your old bedroom, just being around home, there's nothing like that.
The phrase we use at the brokerage is a fulfilling life begins at home. And if you don't have like safety and security and that feeling of home in your house, like it's hard to really build upon that in any other way. Like your life is going to be a bit chaotic until home feels like home.
Yeah.
And there are nostalgic features and things that are just hard. Yeah, like I said, they're just hard to replicate. And I love the Pacific Northwest. That's actually like our business model is probably either Portland or Seattle, possibly Tacoma as the first franchise of retro real estate. We're in talks with a few different people out there to take the brand national and
That's cool.
up and down. Yeah, there's so many awesome houses. I mean,
Well, you know, I'm
talking
gonna-
about your mom's house, like I can picture it in my head, like, and just the style of houses out there, and they're beautiful.
Yeah.
There's nothing like
They
it.
still have the same linoleum on the bathroom floor that we grew up on. I mean, it's 1968, so what is that? I mean, almost 50 years old?
Yeah.
Is that my thing,
Well,
could it be that old?
yeah, it is. Yeah. In my head, it's still the year 2000 for some reason. So I'm like, oh no, it's not that old. It's only, yeah. Honestly, time capsule homes, you say long in the tooth and dated as if it, almost in a pejorative sense. But I mean, as somebody who renovated this place and left a lot of period appropriate features, like people.
This place being our building,
Yeah,
the
sorry.
Summit building here. Yeah,
the one you
exactly
announced
right.
we were at.
Yeah, which, by the way, was built the same year I was born.
Nice.
In 1961. And you've got an eye for real estate.
Yeah.
It still looks pretty dang good, doesn't
It's
it?
gorgeous. Yeah. And I think those period appropriate features that you left intact here, like, is what makes the statement of this place. And like, if your folks' house is still completely unmolested after all these years, and that would probably go viral if you went in and took, with a nice photographer, and people would go bananas for that house because it's like traveling back in time.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
So you were traveling with this band, Where Eagles Dare. What did you play?
I played bass in that band.
And were you singing too?
Backup vocals and singing's a cute term, and I appreciate it.
Yeah.
The reason my voice at 39 years old is still very raspy is I've shredded my vocal cords over the years playing in punk and hardcore bands, and it's just yelling and fast, and we tightened up near the end, but we were basically just, let's play some good punk music with some lyrics and, espouse our morals of unity and want everybody to get along and positive attitudes, and let's just get on the road, man.
How long were you on the road?
In that band, we did I would say about 3 years of pretty constant touring. Yeah. My poor mom, had to, I was pre-med.
Oh, really?
In college, when I got the opportunity to join the band, it was already started without me.
Where were you going to school?
I was I was taking classes both at PV and SCC, or PVCC and SCC, getting all the prereqs out of the way on my way to...
But you were envisioning the doctor?
Yeah, I mean, I was getting all the prereqs knocked out.
Dr.
O'Hagan, yeah. And, we visiting all the med schools in town, trying to figure out what the life plan was. And I had my EMT certification already, and, I was going down that medical road, and I was like, hey, how about instead of that, Mom, I'm going to drop out of school, and I'm going to go tour in this, like, crappy punk band with my friends. I was like, what? Like, yeah, and I'm going to get a job bartending because, I started bartending at a music venue here locally called the Marquee Theater.
Oh, yeah.
And they were, their whole livelihood is built on touring acts. So while they didn't love that I'd be like, all right, I'm going to be gone for 2 months, I'm going to go on tour, they kind of they didn't have much room to say, like, no, that's inappropriate and unprofessional to go on tour, right? Like, they made their living from touring bands. So they were really cool. I'd, go on tour for a couple months, come back with $30 in my bank account because we were playing to, anywhere between 10 to 50 kids a night, trying to, make it on the road. And sometimes there was enough for Taco Bell.
Why did you leave that glamorous life, and what did you do next?
Yeah, that's a great question. It was time for the project itself had run out of steam. We kind of wanted to go in different directions artistically.
Now, wait a minute. So it wasn't a punk band. It was a project.
Yeah, I'd say that. Yeah, I mean, like, project punk. Yeah,
I like it.
Yeah,
I like people. Most people just say I played a punk band, but no, it was bigger. It was big. It was a project.
It was. It was 5 of our lives, you know. And there's a bizarre time travel when you go on tour where, life at home keeps going and it doesn't feel like it should, when you come back and it's jarring and dysregulating. And so, you come back and life has moved on and you come home and you have, your friends are hanging out with other friends and there's new patterns and people have, moved and things have happened. And it started to feel like not real life when we were on the road. And the project itself had, it's five different dudes in their 20s trying to agree on anything, like let alone how to create art together in a manner that is satisfying and true and authentic. And it was awesome. We put out a bunch of records. We had all the success and experiences that one can hope for in that genre of music. And I still have lifelong friends, and done business deals, and where our kids are getting raised together, and from friends that I met on the road and went on tour with and stuff. So it was absolutely incredible, but it was time. I was tired of sleeping on an 8x10 Ampeg bass cabinet in the back of the van. And, anybody who lets you sleep at their house either smokes inside or has 100 cats, it's just like, God, this is gross.
So do you got a audio file I can use to play a tune at the end of this episode?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Shoot me your favorite one.
Sure, happy to do it.
And then we're going to drop it at the end of the show when we're all said and done.
I apologize ahead of time for the listeners that are.
I can't do. Are we going to have to beep anything out? Well, we're just going to let it run.
It's so much. Yeah, it's so much yelling. Nobody will know it.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So what'd you do next then?
So I came home. And I was in a very long-term relationship too, and we bought a house and got married. And so I went from this really on the road, barely having any money, came home, we were bartending, there's a lot of money back then, and lending was a lot looser.
Yeah.
Home lending was a lot looser back then. And so bought a house, filled it full of roommates. My first wife and I got married and settled down, took on a piercing apprenticeship.
Body
piercing. Yeah. The singer for that band Where Eagles Dare, one of my best friends, Jason, he was finishing up a tattoo apprenticeship. And so he went into the tattoo world, and I was like, I like hanging out at tattoo shops. I got a bunch of tattoos.
You got a few?
I got a couple. Yeah. And I was like, man, every body piercer that I know seems like I have a nice car and a pretty decent house, and maybe I'll see what's up with that. And I was lucky enough to earn a piercing apprenticeship under a gentleman named Miley, and got through that pretty quick and started body piercing and hated it. Just hated it. A really busy day, you can make, a good chunk of money, $400, $500 on a busy day, but a 10-hour shift, a busy,
you're drilling holes in people.
It wasn't even that was the unsatisfying part for me. It was so much sitting around, and kind of figured out that I'm somebody that needs variety in my day, sitting in the same space. And I think that's why I like academia and classroom learning has been. So I'm a fairly smart person. I've got good grades. I don't do well in an academic situation. Honestly, even broker school, it was really hard for me to just sit still. I think it basically took a while for me to get an adult ADHD diagnosis. And since I've had that, things have gotten a lot calmer. But back then, I was
out of control.
It just didn't feel good. Yeah, I felt useless. And so I started talking to another friend of mine named David. And he's like, why don't we do some real estate stuff? My grandma taught me when I was young, blah, blah, blah. I was like, real estate? That's then I'm like, actually, yeah, that makes a ton of sense.
You had a tattoo parlor, though, somewhere along the way.
Yeah, so I basically started. I got my real estate license, and then Jason, the person, the singer for the band that I was talking about, and my friend David, the one that I just referenced, at the same time that I started my real estate career, we started talking about opening up a tattoo shop together because Jason was tattooing. We learned a lot of lessons, what to do, what not to do from others, and my parents are both entrepreneurs, and I've never worked, and I don't mean this in a negative way or a judgy way, but I've never worked for somebody that I haven't thought, I think I can do this better. Mm-hmm. And again, not that they weren't competent, not that they weren't great, but just, we all want to put our own, if you're cooking, you want to put your own ingredients in the mix. And watching my parents do that, I never had the self-doubt that I think is required for a lot of people, and probably a smart thing for a lot of people. Like, I just was like, oh, we'll just do it ourselves, right? And so coming from a punk background, everything was DIY. And if you want to put out a record, you did it yourself. And only record labels that we would work with were ones that had a DIY ethic. Like, I didn't want to sign these big record labels that would tell us how to write songs or tell us what to do. And so I've kind of took that same ethic and moved it into entrepreneurship. Mm-hmm. I wanted to not sleep on an Ampeg 8x10. I wanted to be comfortable, have a nice bed, have the same toilet, instead of a gas station toilet in Jasper, Alabama. Like, this is the last one for 90 miles. Good luck. Like, there's some great stuff about tour and some really gross stuff about tour. So I was like, well, I need to make some money. And I think taking that DIY ethic into entrepreneurship and being young enough to sort of not quite know why most people are afraid of doing that as just perfect coalescing of like, let's go.
Yeah. And you guys had like the #1 tattoo shop here in Arizona for a while.
Yeah. I mean, it still is.
Yeah.
So we opened up, I think it was 2010 officially opened up. We had to deal with a lot of permitting stuff. The city pushed back. It was hard. And Golden Rule Tattoo is the name of it. And just a couple months ago, I resigned from the business, sold my shares to my good friends. Like David and Jason are still two of my best friends. And those are my former partners. And now they own the shop outright. And it's awesome for them. They're much more passionate about it than I am. I got to do the things I wanted to in that business. And they are, in my opinion, still the best shop in town. It's awesome. I'm super proud of Golden Rule. But I grew my own personal real estate career and the shop pretty much at the same time.
And you were working for Remax? Was that your first gig?
Yeah. So I worked under a team at Remax 2000 for the beginning of my career for the first few years, I think. I'm bad with dates. And they shut down overnight on us. Like, just, I think it was like Christmas Eve. We got this like company-wide email and like, just shut down overnight.
We're out of here.
And I was like, wait, what? And so the team I was on at the time.
And this was your first foray in real estate. So you're on this Remax team. How long were you there before they shut it down?
I want to say like 3 years, 2 or 3 years.
So you were starting to build a career there, and then they blindsided you out of nowhere.
Out of nowhere, yeah. And
well, what did you think when that happened? I mean, you said the wait what, but how did it really hit you?
At first, I thought it was a joke, and I reached out to my teammates who were my mentors in real estate at the time, and I was like, "Hey, is this like a prank? Is this like an annual like?
Oh, it's a Christmas Eve.
Yeah. Like pretends to be the Grinch. Like, what is this?" And they were like, "Wait, oh no!" And it was this huge thing, and it was super scary. That to my recollection, that person folded up the brokerage overnight, owing like hundreds of thousands of dollars, and just to our team alone, tens of thousands. And then that person tried to sue me for leaving without giving 30 days notice.
After they shut
the brokerage down. Yeah. So I had to spend like $700 to have a lawyer write a letter that's like, okay, take it out of the 10 grand you owe me and send me, $9,300 or whatever the request for the funds were. But it was like, to me, it was affirmation of what I had suspected, which is there is no safety in large companies. The idea that working for a large company means that there's somehow more security than doing it yourself. To me, I've always been the one. I want the ball when it's goal time. At the end of the day, if a big decision needs to be made, pass or fail, I'm able to take accountability. Like if I screw something up, I'm good with that. If someone else screws something up for me, I feel like a major loss of agency, and I don't like that at all.
Yeah. Well, then did you went on to work for another Remax, or tell us about the story of where they were asking you to conform, and you were conforming until.
So with Remax 2000, the like handbook was you've got to do this. You can't wear jeans. You've got to wear your name tag. Like they give you a little Remax name tag when you're out showing properties. You absolutely have to cover your tattoos. And the people I was working for they were great, but they were a little, I think, apprehensive or trigger shy around just fully being themselves too. And that's like, it makes sense culturally in real estate, where there is a ton of realtors out there. So in my opinion now, looking back with 2020 vision, we should have started this way earlier, just being ourselves. But back then you kind of had to act like a realtor. Like, I was like, I don't.
So when is this? 2010-ish?
Maybe even earlier, maybe like 06.
Okay.
So when I started real estate years actually before we officially got off the ground, but we were talking about the tattoo shop for a long time. So maybe that's why the dates aren't lining up. But we wound up like, so probably like 06, 07.
You're in the 2000s.
Yeah.
They're wanting you to conform to their branded look and feel and uniform and your name tag and really everything that goes against the ethic of punk rock, I would imagine.
It felt too jarring, right? Like, I was like, well, I thought like real estate, I was kind of operating my own business, and I was, success or fail was on me. Why do I got to dress like all these other people in this brokerage here? Like, I met some cool people, but I felt inauthentic. But I felt pressure from everywhere that I had to pretend I had to look a certain way. I had to pretend to act a certain way. I had to behave like a realtor behaves and look like a realtor looks. And what that meant felt like, like pretty far away from what I felt. And I think I had a good enough friend group and a good enough like social sphere with the people that respected me that I was able to scrape by for a little bit. People were like, well, I know he's new, but I like John. I trust him. I'm sure he's doing good. So I had some business, but my close rate when I'd get to the table was, it wasn't great.
And why is that? I mean, do you think that they felt you were being inauthentic and maybe they couldn't even articulate it, but they just sensed it?
Yes, 1,000%. And, obviously this is anecdotal in a very small sample size.
Yeah.
It's just me, right? And looking backwards. But I think people are smart. Right? All of us now have been completely inundated with advertising and people that want to sell us stuff all the time, all day long. Everywhere you look is someone trying to get a foot in the door. And so we developed this, sort of like resistance to that, this wall around people that are in sales industries or that are in, coaching, or just anybody who it kind of feels like everybody wants to get one over on you. And so if you sense any sort of inauthenticity or like somebody's got an angle that they're pushing, that resistance just, triples, right?
It does. It's just totally triggered.
Yeah. And it's hard to articulate. You just feel like an icky vibe from somebody. Yeah. And up until this point in my life, I'm a bartender, I'm playing punk rock, I'm, I don't know, I work at a tattoo shop. Like, I never had to care at all around what I was presenting as. Right. I've been able to speak my mind freely on stage in front of, hundreds of people, thousands of people, 10 people, whatever. I didn't have that like, oh, I better act like a ...
But now you were.
Now
you found
I had
yourself in that situation. So what happened? What was the moment when you said, screw this, I'm not doing it anymore? You shared your colors with the world. What the hell? Take us to that moment, and then what happened?
Yeah, I think I was feeling icky going on these appointments and trying to act as if, and I think there's some merit to acting as if when it comes to success, but acting as if I were someone I wasn't. And I think people read it, and I think I felt bad, and I didn't like. I was like, maybe real estate's not for me. Like, I was really on the fence and just feeling kind of icky and like, man, is this what life is? And it's like, well, I mean, that bedroom at my mom's house is still there. If everything else goes, really just goes terribly. I'm, married. We got a nice stable relationship. I don't have kids. I know that I can succeed on very little money if I need to. I know how to do that. I could always go back to piercing. I could
You had options.
I had options. I had a safety net, which is a total privilege to have that safety net. My mom had a house with a bedroom in it, and I could show up at the door with some bags packed, and my wife, arm around my wife, like, "Hey, Mom, I failed, and I need a restart." Yeah. Right? A lot of people don't have that, but since I did have it, I took advantage of it, and I talked to the team members that I was with at the time, and we had gone from that RE/MAX 2000 to another RE/MAX branch while they opened their own brokerage. I followed him over to that new brokerage, and I said, hey, since we're doing everything ourselves now, just a heads up, this is what I am going to do. I totally understand if you need me to be in a different place, a different brokerage. I'm not asking permission, but I want to give you as much advance notice as possible. And they were super nervous for me. They were supportive. We believe in you. We'll do everything we can, but understand you're going to alienate a lot of people, and we may not they just I think at the time they were, because this was probably now 2010, 2011. The market was rough. Mm-hmm. Lots of REO.
Coming out of the recession.
Yeah, lots of REO properties, lots of bank-owned properties. And, I'm showing houses in 122 degrees that have no AC on in them, in a long-sleeve shirt and a sweater.
Slacks,
shirt,
just sweater, and you say, screw it. What did you show up in the next day?
Yeah, I came in, jeans and a band T-shirt. And, it's like, I'm a fairly well put together person. I think I clean up okay. I don't have I take care of my personal hygiene. I wear clothes that fit me. I care about my appearance, but I don't I feel like I look well put together, but I don't feel right in somebody else's clothes. And I felt like I was wearing my dad's clothes or somebody's uncle's clothes instead of mine, right? I hadn't made them mine yet. Which ironically now I like dressing up, but it's one thing, when I'm still a punk kid at heart, right? I don't want to be told I have to. Anything I'm told, I get resistant to. But I just said, hey, this is what I'm doing, period. And I appreciate your support. Awesome. And I think I tripled my sales that year. I had an unbelievable jump in closing rate. It went from 45% to 90 something percent. Every time I got to the table, I was I'm just going to be me. I'm going to curse, right? That's how I speak. I'm going to talk authentically. I'm going to give people the pros and the cons. I'm going to give everybody every single piece of information, and I want them to make informed decisions while given professional advice and counsel.
So what you're saying is when they had you dressed up they wanted you to dress up, so they were shutting down your physical persona. It actually sounds like it kind of shut down your mental persona, 100%. And you were like a robot selling the RE/MAX way.
Yeah.
And you said, you know what?
No.
This punk guy's coming out. You're just going to get me in all my glory or gory or however you want to take. But it
gory and glory and gory. I love it. That's exactly right. Pros and the cons, the bumps, the scabs, and the and the shiny white teeth, everything. But rather than trying to sell somebody that I'm the right person to represent their house, I'm going, hey, here are the things that I'm bad at. Here are the things that I'm good at. I also hired an assistant at the time, very early in my career, because I'm bad at organization. I'm not super detail oriented when it comes to anything involving organization. So I hired an assistant very early to handle paperwork stuff. And I'm like, look, I'm terrible at paperwork, which is not what you want to hear from your realtor.
Yeah.
It's you're signing a legal contract with. So, but I've hired and I pay somebody really well who is great at paperwork.
But
naturally.
meet Jerry.
Yes.
Jerry loves paperwork. Yeah.
And that helps get young agents an opportunity to get really experienced with paperwork, to see work with a busy agent like me and get their sea legs, for a better lack of, be able to experience real estate and participate in it without having the ability to generate their own leads. Yeah. It's hard when it's your first few years and you've only done 4 deals and somebody has a question for you about something complicated and you're like, I don't know. And it's not that I don't want to know, I just don't. But if, the people that work for me have done hundreds of deals now, more than most of the other agents out there, even though they're not necessarily quote unquote their deals. They've got the experience. They know the answer. They've run the paperwork and they've done the whole
What
thing.
I'm interested in particularly is that first month or two. So it was liberating to be able to come out and be yourself, but you also had to be trepidatious. Like, is this going to work or do I need to go find another gig? When you started seeing your sales take off, what was the perceived difference that you saw in the people sitting across from you now that they're meeting and talking with the real John versus the RE/MAX John?
That's an awesome question. And that was maybe one of the best times of my life. Like you asking that question, I can feel the like butterfly and like relief of that weight on my shoulder, because it was a really scary thing. Up until that point, nobody that I knew was heavily tattooed and casually dressed as a realtor. No one. And certainly not any successful ones.
Which is a nice position if you can pull it off.
Yeah. But I sat down at the table not feeling like I had any sort of script to follow or any sort of agenda. And I met no resistance. I met people that were excited to invite me into their house. And I can talk to anybody about anything. I've got a lot, I feel like I'm able to connect to people really well when I'm getting to be myself, right? And it's just like, oh, we got to just drop the whole facade. And so I'll walk into somebody's house and they're like a little taken aback. Like I can feel that taken aback. And like, wait, I thought you were going to be like a realtor guy and you just look like somebody like the neighbor that walked across the street. Like you got a nice haircut and it's a nice watch, but like, I thought, aren't you supposed to? And it kind of just takes the like, then they don't feel like they need to put on airs. They can like, oh, you're in your own house, man, relax.
But you're also underscoring a really important principle in storytelling and communication. And that is, how do you start with the familiar and then make it novel so that you become interesting to arouse interest, and then you pay that off with delivery. So they're expecting the familiar to walk in. Okay, well, I've got a real estate guy here. All right. But he doesn't look like who everybody else likes. Now that's novel. Oh my God, is this guy going to hold me up?
Yeah.
Can he actually do this? And then you open your mouth and let them know, like, this guy's got it going. I mean, this guy knows what's going on. I like this. So you are really playing to a very primal element in our storytelling brain of how do you make the familiar novel?
Yeah, I had never broken it down like that, but I remember the glee in watching, like I can watch while I'm chatting with somebody who is taken aback and then sort of relaxes, and then watching the like, oh, when they start asking me questions about real estate, oh, this dude actually really knows what he's talking about. Oh, wow, he's got some really impressive numbers. Oh, wow, he's telling, like it's almost like I've lowered their expectations, like inadvertently, like, playing off of that judgment of like, oh, people who are heavily tattooed or dressed casually or whatever.
Yeah, they're like, surprising that. They're totally judging you.
Yeah.
We all do it. I mean, it's a survival mechanism.
Exactly.
Is this guy going to pull a knife on me?
Yeah.
Or what? Or is he going to start singing?
Yeah.
With those bloody punk rock tunes?
Yeah. I think that's a really interesting element of like novelty, because we all love that. Like, right. Like, we can all enjoy novelty to maybe too much, but like that moment of where everybody can just relax. And now it's no longer a sales call. Now it's like, hey, is this a good fit for both of us?
Yeah.
Right. Is this the kind of person we want representing us?
Did you ever get anyone to say, get out?
Never anybody that's asked me to meet with them. Right. So nobody that's called me. I have had really interesting interactions with neighbors because I don't look like a realtor. Like I've had like almost physical
like you're selling the house next door to them, you mean, that kind of neighbor?
Mostly with showings. So okay. I'm showing a home for sale. I'm there with my buyers and I'm bending over getting the lock out of the lockbox, and all of a sudden there's a person in the yard. Can I help you?
And then a Doberman.
Well, yeah, I mean, people get really hyper aggressive, right? And like depending on the neighborhood too, like the houses I sell are, all over the spectrum. So depending on the neighborhood, some, neighbors tend to be a little bit more nosy or like protective, maybe is like the non-pejorative way to say. Yeah. So I've had people confront me like, what are you doing? And I'm like, what does it look like I'm doing? Well, you don't look like a realtor. And I'm like, show me the dress code for realtor, but like, I'm like, God, like what a dumb way to like help quote unquote your neighbor not sell their house, right? But I mean, I've had to threaten people before, like where they've like stepped in between me and the house, or like tried to walk in during showings, or like actually walked into the house while I'm showing it to confront me about why I'm in their neighbor's house.
But the beautiful thing about that is you get people's attention.
Yes.
And isn't that what we're all starving to do? I mean, it's just trying to get attention, and you're getting it by being yourself. Now, does everyone have to run around and be a former punk band bass player and have tattoo sleeves and, go out? I mean, no. What's your thought for listeners?
even if everybody, if that were a formula that worked, right, and everybody tried to mimic it, or even some people tried to mimic it, they'd be a weird version of me instead of a weird version of themselves, right? Like, we all have our own separate weirdness and our own unique features and variables that have created the person that we are. And I think I feel like most people can relate to having to put on a work facade, right? Like, there's memes about it, there's jokes about it, about like how you have to act at work versus when you get home. And there's certainly times and places where if you're working for someone else, they have a standard of care or standard of practice that you have to abide to, buy milk and keep the lights on and, keep the landlord off your back. That's a necessary evil, sure. But if you're in any sort of like self-lead generation business, if you're doing anything but being authentically yourself, I think you're probably doing yourself a disservice. Like, again, anecdotal, but anybody that I know, and I've got some really successful mentors in my life. I mentioned before we started Russell Shaw, the number one realtor year after year after year. And there is nobody that is more themselves than Russell Shaw.
And Russell Shaw, as we were talking for you listening out there, in my early days in the advertising marketing world, I wrote and produced a ton of radio commercials. And in fact, if you go to show number 250, show number 300, it's nothing but like 10 of my early radio commercials. You can hear them there, and I loved it. It was great fun. Russell Shaw, I don't even know where I found him, but he was doing some other stuff. I heard him on air, and I go, I got to find this guy because he has such a unique voice, and you could just tell the attitude behind it was marvelous. And I hired Russell for several radio commercials and just laughed my ass off.
He's amazing. Yeah. And I think he had a radio show for quite a long time.
And then he got into real estate roughly early 90s. Was it later than that?
I think
late 90s, maybe early 2000s. And
no, I think he might have been even earlier than that. He might have been in it since the 80s because he was doing the radio show.
But he started doing his TV spots. And that was probably 5 years after I had kind of wrapped up my radio career and was on to something else. I go, oh, there's Russell.
Hey.
What? Did he give up voice work and now he's selling homes?
Yeah.
He had those crazy commercials going.
Yeah. I mean, like when we go out to eat, there's never a time when we go out to eat that somebody has not come over to the table and been like, hey, you're Russell Shaw from TV. And like, yeah, and like people like sit down in between him and I to ask them questions.
If I can find it, I will find my old cassette tapes of one of Russell's spots. I'll digitize it and we'll put it into the show.
He would love that. And I'm sure he will listen to this. He will love hearing all about that. And if you were able to find that audio, it's going to make his day for sure.
All right, I'll work on that. But anyways, he has been a mentor for you.
Yeah.
But very much of a guy who is his own man.
Absolutely.
He's a goofball. He's brilliant.
Totally brilliant and just 100% authentically himself in all situations. Needs nothing from anybody.
Yeah.
And to be in that space, he's been able to build his brand and build his office the way he wants to and build the people around him, both personal, professional, romantic. He's able to just be himself in everything and has had wild success from it.
Well, and coming full circle now from the beginning of the show, going back to retrorealestate.com and go check out John's site. I mean, you have an extraordinarily distinctive position in the real estate marketplace, and here in Arizona, like everywhere, there are millions of you. So the first question is, we'll get to why that positioning, but do we really even need realtors anymore? I mean, you got Open Door, you got Zillow. Aren't you guys like the dinosaur?
Totally obsolete. Sure. Yeah, we're the next travel agents, which I actually really appreciate travel agents. The more I have to deal with Priceline.coms and things like that.
Yeah.
So Open Door and Zillow and some of the larger companies that are companies like that, not them specifically for legal reasons, they're doing some really great things. And I think there's a really important position for them in the market. And we crucified by other realtors for saying this, even acknowledging that they serve any sort of like
functional benefit to
benevolent
society.
function, sure. I don't feel aggressive towards anything that can offer a consumer something that it needs. If I'm unable to offer that to them, or they're able to serve that person better, I don't feel entitled to anyone's business, right? The idea that if I can give somebody 80% of what they want, and this new company can give them 100%, then I should try to block that company from existing. Like, no, I either need to get my own shit together or let them take, I can learn that lesson and recognize that I need to serve my customers better, or I've not earned that business. But they serve a totally different business than realtors do. I don't think realtors have ever been our value has never been just access to homes online or whatever. Like that's not been our job. Our job is representation, right? Professional advice and counsel. Now, when everything goes smoothly, your realtor should feel almost like you didn't need them at all. But there's so much going on behind the scenes in real estate that we are, through experience, making the process smooth. But when it really hits the fan and you need expert advice, when you're working with a company when you don't have representation, right? It's you versus a giant company. When you don't have your own representation, that's when things really get hairy. How to figure out what your home is actually worth. An algorithm like Zillow, they're very honest about their ratios and how far off they are. And it's usually 10 to 20% in either direction. And it's not a criticism of the algorithm. That's what it does. It just takes square footage, and your house right next to my house is somewhat equal square footage. And that's the best you can hope for. Running comps is as much art as it is science, and recognizing what things in a particular neighborhood are more valuable to buyers in this neighborhood than others. And it could be granite countertops are really popular in this neighborhood. And so if you don't have granite countertops, your house is worth less. Or it could be if you put granite countertops in a 1920s like California bungalow, and you've done like a Home Depot big box remodel on this home, and it was previously the original countertops and the original flooring, you've actually cost yourself money, right? But if you can't see any of that, because how could Zillow see any of that, right? It's not their fault necessarily. It's just they're encumbered by not having all the information. So, knowing those specialty things, neighborhood to neighborhood and home to home, and being able to give an accurate valuation based on those variables is where a realtor comes into play.
It's kind of an AI versus humanity.
Totally. And it's not AI making the purchasing decision. It's humanity. And we all, like I said at the beginning of this, we all want to pretend that it's just a numbers investment when we buy a home. But hell no, it's not. When you have something that's emotionally pulling you into a home and you want to build a life there and you want to create and that fulfilling life, there are things that you can't quite put down in a formulaic way and justify. I mean, appraisers have to try to figure that out, but knowing what goes where and how to make sure that we don't make remodeling decisions and how to navigate a really complex transaction, and why, in this market right now, the big thing that I'm having to talk to sellers about is the highest number. If we have 10 offers, the highest number is not the best offer. Because if that highest number doesn't come with it an appraisal contingency waiver, then that's a fictitious number, because we know the home won't appraise for what they're offering. But this number down from there, it may be 10, 20 grand less. But if it's got an appraisal waiver, that's more of a guarantee that we're going to get that actual number.
Yeah, but in this market where people are paying $100,000 over asking price, I guess that doesn't matter. But this is a pretty weird market right now.
It's a super weird market, but they can offer to pay $100 grand over. But if they still keep their appraisal contingency, meaning if the home appraises for less than what they offer, they can only buy it for that appraised value.
Yeah.
Now we're halfway through a transaction and it's got to cancel.
Yeah.
Right? Or the seller
wasted everybody's time.
Everybody's time. The buyer's wasted time. The seller's been off the market for this. Now we got to go back on with a little scar, a little black eye that says, why'd you fall out? That's going to be the next 30 phone calls that I get. So finding and having somebody representing their interests, to me, has always been what the value of a realtor is. And whether that's a really hungry realtor who's brand new but will give you all their attention. I've got a couple of those that work for me, and they are amazing realtors. They ask me every single thing. right? Every single question that comes up, they ask me. So I'm texting with them all the time. But they're gaining that experience and their knowledge, and they're able to come to me and provide that to their clients. You know, it doesn't have to be a super experienced agent. I'm 14 years in this business. I'm consistently in the top 3 to 5%. I do a lot of deals. There's very few things that I have not seen in this industry, right? Like nothing gets me panicked anymore. But you know, at the same time, it's not my MLS access. Right? Like the MLS is ugly and totally not user-friendly compared to sites like Zillow or Redfin or whatever. But would I want my mom to go off a Zestimate for what she would sell her home for? Like, of course not. Like, that's not an accurate representation to make a selling decision or a buying decision on. You need an actual comparative market analysis.
So is this wacky market bubble going to burst, and is it going to burst anytime soon, and what might that look like if it does?
So while I am not an economist, I do pay a nice hefty fee to subscribe to people who are that write and give us analogies. So obviously this will as soon as this podcast comes out, the info will be dated, but or to some degree. But the way that we typically see, or the metric that we use in real estate for an average market, a market that's not good for sellers or good for buyers, is active homes, the amount of active homes in the market. And in the Phoenix market, generally that's somewhere between 28,000 and 35,000 active homes. It's not good for sellers, it's not good for buyers, it's just sort of blah, right? A regular market. Nobody's writing news stories on it, right? Like that's the kind of market. So 28,000 to 35,000 homes active. Right now, as of yesterday, we have 5,400. And it is not due to increased demand. We've had the same amount of growth, the same amount of demand relatively the last 7 years. Phoenix is this huge hub of people coming to us. We've been chronically underbuilding for the last decade, right? Builders are super scared. A lot of them went really broke and got left with, a lot of land, a lot of homes half finished, and totally decimated that building industry. I've had a lot of other factors, both COVID and political related, to where supply, both for labor, people who build homes actually do the work, right? And materials have been either withheld or supply chain issues and things like that.
The costs have gone through the roof. What? Lumber's up 30-35% or something crazy like that?
It went up to 3 times, to my understanding, it went up to 3 times what it was, but it has come down about 40%, but it's still higher than it was last year by a long shot. And getting it is a problem. We're in this really tough place where it's all right, nobody's willing to build to the same speculative way that they were. And granted, did they overbuild? And it was of course they did. And that was a big part of why the market crashed. It was all, loose lending and a lot of speculative buying and building. But we've been chronically playing it really safe. And we haven't been able to keep up with demand. And so now we have this insane demand. People are still moving here. And there's just no supply. And we will see prices rise. My understanding, the Cromford report, last I read, was predicting 25 to 40% overall market appreciation from January 21 to January 22. That's huge. And that feels like a bubble, right? We would think, oh God, it's going to burst. This is not a bubble. This is chronic undersupply. We've got years. If we don't increase our supply amount, we've got years of pent-up demand to where we're not going to see a crash, because how could you? If we have this much demand, people need places to live. How could there be a crash, right? We just don't have enough houses to all of a sudden have an abundance of houses and not enough buyers, which is what a crash is, right? Interest rates are so low. It's hard to get qualified right now. They're very strict with qualifying. But once you're qualifying, interest rates are super duper low. The lowest I've seen in a long time. And I mean, they've gone up slightly, but 3%, floating around 3% is bananas.
Yeah.
I was so proud of myself when I bought my first house at 6.5%. So I had an 820 credit score. It's high-fiving people. I was I'm a grown up. watching people get 3% rates, I'm like, or even lower for a little bit last year. It's like, geez,
yeah,
you know, like
it's crazy.
So your buying power is huge right now. Prices have not shot up the way that you would expect yet. They're being held back with like conservative appraisals, right? Some people are able to waive appraisal value or contingencies right now and pay above, and we're starting to see that increase in overall market rise, and that will start once people start seeing that they're going to get a lot for their house, they'll start selling it. Yeah. And so while we may see a less crazy market, we won't see buyers fist fighting and like stabbing each other in the streets trying to get the houses. We're going to have a huge rise, in my opinion. Again, I'm not an economist, I'm just a lowly broker. We're going to see a large market appreciation, a significant market appreciation before we even taper off. Mm-hmm. And I don't see a crash, I see a tapering off.
Gotcha.
So, I mean, it's weird because it's a great time to sell, but also a great time to buy, which is very convenient for me to be saying to people when they're like, nice, you know, like it doesn't feel objective at all.
Well, I never thought we would get into the whole housing market dynamics, but thank you for that. Thank you for that.
Yeah,
you know?
Absolutely. So, who doesn't want to hear about real estate, you know?
So let's go back. Final question. Let's wrap it up for our listeners here. What have you learned then in your life and this great brand that you have built that you are now looking at franchising and expanding nationwide? Focus on this mid-century home lifestyle, because as you said earlier, these homes are infused with family, infused versus these cookie cutter things you see put in everywhere. What advice would you give our listener about how they can be their own selves and the power in that?
I think being really intentional and recognizing, like, you know, for me, it was years of therapy that helped me kind of discover who I actually was versus who I thought I was, who I was trying to be or felt pressured to be, or like, our culture, like the general culture, feels like it pushes a lot of people into a box. And there can be this shame built up around, oh, I don't fit in this box, or I feel weird when I act like this. And rather than seeing that as something that is a negative and something like, oh, there's something wrong with me. It's like, oh, actually, there's nothing wrong with me. I'm just a little different. And that feels a little bit like a after school special, like all of our differences makes it, you know, like, and I'm not trying to be like trite, but like really like figuring out who you are and designing an intentional life around what will make you happy by being yourself, instead of, oh, I want this, so I should act like this person. I should pretend to be a guy who gets these things, or I should pretend to be a girl who gets these things. Of like, okay, what's important to me? How do I do that while being authentically myself, and truly, truly authentically myself? Not what somebody else, my mom, my dad, my sisters, my brothers, my friends, you know, my teachers at school, like, at some point, I feel like the renegotiation of self and how we interact with the world can be such an empowering thing, and everything comes from that. Yeah. So once we're there, then it's just time to take the reins, and you know, if you're true to self is and finding your true north and not letting anybody else. I mean, you got to be open to criticism, right? But not letting anybody else influence where you go, and I think is the most foundational thing for my success. And I can't think of anybody who would not benefit from that.
Well, John O'Hagan, thank you for being here on The Business of Story. Where can people learn more about you and your company?
I think retrorealestate.com is a great way. We're very active on like Instagram and Facebook, you know, so those
great photos, great website, and funny videos. Nice work.
Thank you. Yeah,
check them out.
The funny videos that's great. Those are like, I'm really proud of those, is just to get to be a goofball around a serious topic and show our personalities is just, it's just the best.
Awesome. Well, thanks, man. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me on here. It is an absolute honor.
And thank you all for listening to this edition of The Business of Story. Feel free to share John's story with a friend, family, colleague member, anybody who you know that may be struggling with their own story. Maybe they're living someone else's story, which we've all been down that road before. But some great insight here, and heck, you even got some free real estate advice and market dynamics in the process. If I can be of service to you, come on over to the Business of Story. If you have not yet signed up for the ABTs of Selling online course in under 18 minutes, 3 short videos, I'm going to teach you the power of the ABT and how you can use it to blow your sales out of the water. Check it out over at Check it out over at businessofstory.thinkific.com. John, I'm going to have to send you a link to that. Check it out. Your whole team should check out the ABTs of Selling.
We, of course, will. Thank you.
It'll blow you away.
Awesome.
And until next week, when we will have another dynamic story artist right here for you like John, remember that the most potent story you'll ever tell is the story you tell yourself. So make it a great one. Thanks for listening.